Okay, thank you all very much. I'm excited that the community came out to hear myself and Mr. Simmons speak, so we do appreciate that. I've been doing this for 7 years. Mr. Simmons, first time he's presenting, and everybody's here to hear him. So we're excited to share this with you. Sean, you can go ahead to the first slide. This is the appropriate slide, we believe, to start with this presentation, because it is really our core values. It is what we believe in this organization. Everyone has seen our vision multiple times. And when we look at our vision, we lift out the opportunities and engagement of students both inside and outside the classroom, and the value that we place on those opportunities. I can say with 100% confidence that every person in this room supports learning inside and outside of the classroom. With that being said, we talk to students first day of school every year. Get involved. Get involved in some way with your school. That gets you connected to your classmates, that gets you connected to adults in different ways, and we will continue to encourage students to get involved and stay involved in some way. Thinking about that, though, we have to think about safety and security. So nothing else matters if kids aren't safe and secure. So we've shown our Pine Richland Health and Safety Plan. We have shown you multiple times iterations of this athletic and activity health and safety plan. And with guidance from healthcare providers and agencies, we believe we've got a solid plan to present to the board and community tonight. There's tough to read if depending on where you're looking, but we pulled an excerpt from CDC. And again, the reality is guidance changes daily. This came out late last week. It talks about thinking about reopening schools, and here's the reality. There's a risk in everything that we do. There's a risk to open schools. There's a risk to close schools. There's a risk to let kids play, and there's a risk to not let them play. I mean, that is the reality of the conditions that we're living right now. So we've got to weigh those risks and look at those mitigation efforts that are going to provide our students and staff the safest environment possible. It would be ideal if everybody was pointing us in the same direction. The reality is we get guidance from PA Department of Health that says wait until January of 2021. We get the governor's office that supports that, but they also say let that be a local decision. And we get guidance from Allegheny County Health Department, PIAA, WPIAL, that says here's some measures and mitigation efforts that can allow students to move forward. So our job is to look at all that information and then make a determination of what's in the best interest, what we believe, of our kids in our community. As Dr. Miller just mentioned, the reality of these plans, they're in the confines of our schools. So we can manage them, we can regulate them, we can mandate the expectations, and we can oversee to make sure that occurs. You saw a little bit of that whenever Phase 1 was rolled out. Okay, Sean, next slide, please. Another key visual for us is the owner-renter mentality. We talk about this with our building administrators, with our teachers, and obviously we're going to talk about this over and over again with our coaches, our players, and our parents, and our community. Moving forward with the recommendation for fall sports takes ownership from everybody. Every single person that wants to participate has to commit to the level of ownership that we expect. Our number one goal is 4,600 kids learning. That is and always will be our number one goal. We understand families, the families that are seated outside. If my wife were in this district, she'd probably be outside. I mean, that's the nature of families that love their kids, that are focused on their children. We have an obligation to think about 4,600 kids. I understand families can think about their small group. We appreciate their engagement and involvement in this process, but our thought is around what's in the best interest of our big body of Pine Richland School District. So owner versus renter is huge with this, as you're going to hear over and over again in this presentation, that there's an expectation of developing plans at the sport and activity level that are guided by this overarching plan that we're describing with you tonight, and we have the details laid out in board docs, that implementation has to be rock solid, and it has to be rock solid every single day, every single moment. And we'll talk about that throughout the presentation. Okay, next slide, please. Certainty, one thing we know, and we've talked about this, is change. This is the third time we're bringing this plan in front of the school board and community, and that's because there's constant change and information and new information that's coming our way. From the get-go, we talked about a phasing process, and that phasing process is supported by all the healthcare agencies. So phase one we've talked about. That was conditioning, that was physical distancing, that was getting children back on campus with their coaches to start building those relationships with each other and with their coaches. We did a nice job with that, and we'll talk about that more. As we think about the next two phases, we are recommending to move forward with fall sports. Phase two is tryouts and practice. There is heat acclimatization for football that has to be considered. That's in this timeline as well. And then phase three gets us into competition. Competition obviously changes because there's close contact in competition, and there's close contact when you get into phase two with the practicing. We did not put specific dates in this in terms of competition because, as you all know, those are unique to each sport, and they're still actually being modified depending on what's going on in the region. So that's our recommendation for a timeline in terms of moving forward. Band is something that we continue to think about as well in all our other activities. So this isn't just about athletics, it's about athletics and activities. We talked about this in phase one. Our band it's just been really cool that they have been able to do some virtual work with their students, and they've been doing some pod work. So literally what's happening is pods of 25 are coming out based upon where they are within the presentation when you get the full 250 together. And if and when we're ever to bring the full 250 plus together, they will insert themselves with these pods that they've been working on, which is really innovative and cool to do. So we're thinking about not just athletics, we're thinking about activities. We want kids to engage after school. If they're not into athletics, we want them doing something after school. We've made the recommendation that is virtual to start, but you can engage in many of our after-school clubs and activities in a fully virtual environment that gets you connected to your classmates and gets you connected to your sponsors and teachers. So a lot of good things, possibilities around this. The after-school activities are around in these events we're talking about. There is that big part of that social, emotional, physical opportunities that we know that are vital and important for our kids.
Before you move on, just to clarify a couple things. So this is specifically high school, and so you see that in the title. This is specifically high school age. The other thing to mention is the dates that are there that represent a phased-in approach. Remember, that is a delay. That's a delay from what the original schedule was. So there has been a delay to the start of fall sports across the board, but just to be clear, this is high school because Dr. P is going to talk about middle school next.
Yeah, go ahead and change slides. And then coming off of high school, yeah, like as Dr. Miller said, so focusing then on middle school. Middle school did not have and traditionally does not have a phase one approach, but in phase two we are recommending to move forward with middle school athletics as well, but pushing them back even further. So you can see the date recommendations here of not starting middle school sports until September 8th. Justification for that, number of them, first of all, of course, back to school for our students is September 1st. It gives us an opportunity to engage our hybrid model for a period of time. It also gives us an opportunity to implement phase two for our high school athletics and monitor that closely. That success rate then will obviously drive into the opportunities for middle school. And again, the flexibility exists. So if we have to make some modifications to dates and push things back based upon conditions and things that are happening, we believe and we know that we have the flexibility to do so. Okay, Sean, next slide, please. So we've talked about this, summer conditioning. We're coming to the close. Actually, today was the last scheduled day for summer conditioning, and we were able to get kids back, and we were able to keep them back. And the reason that happened is because we had a plan, district-wide, and then we asked every individual coach and sponsor to develop a specific plan that aligned to their sport or activity. We use the phrase car to car. So from the time a child steps out of their car and all the stuff that's going to happen in between to the time they get back into their car, you've got to think about that with the design of your plan. And then the oversight from Mr. Simmons and Mrs. Bowman or any other building principal is to, number one, approve those individualized plans, and then to ensure that they are being implemented with fidelity. We found in cases we were not doing things great over the summer. We learned from them, we made some modifications, we adjusted, and then on a weekly basis, Mr. Simmons or Mrs. Bowman sent out an update to say, hey, here's how we need to modify and change, and we've got to be consistent for every minute, for every activity, for every day. We had confirmed cases over the summer. The summer design was around physical distancing and conditioning. So with those cases, the mitigation efforts obviously were different than it will be in phase 2 and phase 3, where there is close contact happening. But we were proud of the efforts of phase 1, and we intend to continue that model design into phase 2 and phase 3 with overall sport activity specific, approved, and then monitored extremely closely. Okay, next one. This is one, again, Dr. Miller talked about this a bit already, but the reality is COVID's in the community, and that's where we are. Every activity we choose to do comes with risk. I use an example. Yesterday, my wife and I walked around the park with the dog. There's risk to doing that. As we walked around the park, we saw some people physical distancing with masks. We saw can jam happening with groups of people unmasked and people tackling each other. We saw an 8-on-8 football game with a bunch of kids, nobody had a mask on. So everything and every choice that people make every single day comes with risk. The reality of what we're recommending is we can regulate and monitor that some level of risk with this because of the structure of our plan and the oversight opportunities. The other thing that we talked about, and we'll talk about more, is design of our hybrid model and how that supports physical distancing in the schools. Allegheny Health is a partner with us. They have been, they will continue to be. Again, it's not an if, but when there's a confirmed case of COVID, they are partners to contact and discuss what are the right mitigation efforts to take immediately. I spoke to a representative just this past Friday to talk about some scenarios, and speaking of an athletic team that's in phase 2 or phase 3 where there is close contact, if there's a confirmed case, quarantine for 14 days for that team. I mean, that will be the guidelines for those moderate and high-risk sports. That is where it's going to be. A sport like golf, a sport like tennis, we'll look at that on a case-by-case basis and make a determination of what we need to do. So, again, we've said it a couple times, it's just so important, I think, for everyone to hear and understand. The model that we've designed for our kids coming back to school is built around the knowledge that there's going to be some cases, asymptomatic cases, in the school. If we follow the design of the hybrid model and we keep the physical distancing, that'll allow us to minimize the amount of quarantine that's necessary to keep our kids as safe as possible. The other positive to the design of our academic models, if you remember the green in-house, the blue for the transition in and out, that if and when quarantine happens, A student transitioning from the hybrid in-person to the at-home for that period of time, it's not going to be seamless, but it's going to be pretty close to it because of the nature of the design of our model. So we feel really good about that as well. Next one, Sean. So we're driven by data. It's the right thing to do. We have a lot of data resources. Dr. Miller shared this one with you, but the two key ones that we look at are the incident rate per 100,000 and the positivity rate. Those are the two key measures. For Allegheny County, they are moving in the right direction. This was last updated on Friday, 8/21. Our community, Allegheny County, is in the moderate level. In the moderate level, we can do hybrid learning. That is confirmed through that design, and we feel strongly with the hybrid level, we can continue to offer fall sports as well. If at some point, for any reason, we would need to move into that 100% virtual model, we would be pausing all athletics and activities at the same time. Okay, last one for me, Sean, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Simmons. This guidance document was released again this past Friday. So this is one of the things we had talked about last Monday at our board meeting about a question related to how do you conduct some of these activities with a standing order from Allegheny County that that provides a maximum of 25 indoor and 50 outdoor. This guidance document was released because, you know, again, the justification from Allegheny County Health Department and WPIAL was PIAA has provided a health and safety plan with mitigation efforts for each of the fall sports, and that's where why they are supporting it. There's a couple of key bullets on this presentation. The top one is spectators are prohibited from attending in-person events. We're going to hold firm to that, and our community is going to have to understand and respect it. We want to get the kids out to play. We want to keep them out to play. We are going to do everything we have to do to ensure that happens in a safe way, and we are going to follow all the guidelines that we have set forth. So the concept of standing up on a hillside 20 feet away it's a non-option. Sitting in a parked car near the tennis courts is not an option if we move forward with this plan. It's important that we all rally around our kids to allow them to get out there and stay out there, and we need to do those things consistently. Now, the other nice thing that we have at Pine Richland is fortunate we don't just say no, we say no but. No but, we have PRTV. PRTV is a wonderful group of adults and students that enjoy what they're doing, and they are willing to do everything they can to live stream and allow the parents to see their children interact and play and perform and do all the things that parents love to see. We're going to archive video. We're going to put video montages together. So it's not just no, it's no but. We're going to do some things because we understand how important that is to a family. The question about the 50 outdoor activity, we have a diagram here if you want to look at that diagram. To give you a scenario, let's use Pine Richland in yellow. We can have up to 50 in our pod. If we're playing Seneca Valley in orange, they're across the field, they can have 50 in their pod. And then there's a third pod that's considered the competition pod. Again, the reality is the competition pod mixes pods, right? You have kids coming from pod 1 and pod 2 to play in pod 3. That's a reality of what it is. But then that takes me back to our hybrid learning model that allows for that spacing that we have described. So we believe with our model, hybrid learning, the way it's been designed with spacing for kids, and all the mitigation efforts that Mr. Simmons is about to describe for you, that we can move forward with fall sports. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Simmons, and then later in the presentation, or later in the agenda, we'll have an opportunity for the board to ask questions and make comments.
Thanks, Dr. Pasquinelli. I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to present to you today, and I just wanted to talk a little more about the efforts that we've been making to provide a safe and safe environment for the student athletes at Pine Richland. Prior to the activity start date for Phase 2, all coaches and sponsors will be required to submit a return to play plan.
Sean, you can change the slide.
All right.
Go ahead, Sean, go ahead.
Yep. will be required to submit a return-to-play plan that outlines specific details that pertain to their specific sports. These plans have been submitted, they have been reviewed, and they've been approved by myself, and will be approved by the building principal as well. With this process, I'd like to stress that I will use the analogy of game planning. Our coaches, I believe, are the best in the WPIAL. They dedicate a lot of time to their craft. They invest a lot of time developing game plans and executing these game plans and practice plans as well. That same level of detail, that same level of effort was required by our group when we were putting these plans together. Countless hours went into it. We've reviewed it, we've refined it, and we feel that we've had a plan for each sport that is specific enough and provides a safe environment for our student athletes. It was stressed to our coaches. They all had buy-in. They all had ownership of it. And I feel very confident it's a good plan moving forward. Next slide, Sean. Based on the criteria set forth by the National Federation of High Schools, we've been able to classify all our fall sports into 3 categories: high-risk category, moderate risk category, and the low-risk category. Of all our fall sports, football is the only sport that falls into that high-risk category. We are aware of the high-risk classification of the sport of football. And as a result of that classification, we have recommended some extra conditions that our football program must be adhered to. These will be discussed later on in our recommendation. We will continue to proceed in a cautious manner regarding all of our fall sports offerings. However, we feel it's necessary to implement a higher level of safety guidelines and recommendations when pertaining to our high-risk sport activities. So the coaching staff at football is well aware of the high risk that comes with that sport. But we feel like we have put in some good guidelines here to make sure we at least lower the risk of anything happening. And I would be happy to let you know these guidelines later on. Next slide, Sean. Like I mentioned in the previous slide, we are cognizant of the level of risk associated with sports classified as high risk. With that in mind, we have taken a more heightened awareness and a more focused approach with regards to the transition into phase 2 for the high-risk sports. The slide that you see lists some of the guidelines and measures that we've recommended for our football program. Again, that's the only high-risk sport that we offer during the fall season. It'll take some time to go through that slide. We're going to continue with the temperature screening. We just do it now before each practice and before each game. So we're going to increase our efforts with regards to temperature screening. The system screening questions, we're going to continue with that and emphasize that even more. Our staff member, we have assigned new staff members. So bullet number 2, the staff members assigned to monitor implementation of high-risk sporting plans.
So let me just jump in real quickly back to that first bullet. So that we've been doing, just to be crystal clear, the symptom check and the temperature checks happened all summer long as a part of phase 1. The difference here is that that will be conducted for the high-risk sport by the athletic trainers. The athletic trainers will be the one, practice and game, which exceeds the requirements, but they'll do it for all players, including temperature screening. So again, that just to make clear who's doing the screening.
Yeah, and one more note there, just to make sure everybody sees it, you know, even for moderate and low risk, that would be Pine Richland or any of their competitors, the expectations are, and this came through with that Allegheny County Health and WPIAL guidelines, that that level of screening on site should happen before any competition. So football, it would be before practice and competition. For all others that are moderate or low, before competition.
Good. Like read bullet point number 2, staff members assigned to monitor implementation of high-risk sport plans. This is another level of the commitment where we're going above the recommendations. We will have somebody in the stands at all our practices monitoring. I'd use the analogy of a health inspector who would be there to watch all our football practice, and that person reports directly back to me. We will make the adjustments and we'll move on. So we are taking this very seriously, and this is just a commitment that we wanted to show. We've purchased football splash shields for all our student athletes on the football team. The splash shield covers both the eye and the mouth area, and we feel that that is also a measure that would put us in a good position to move forward. We have always, since phase one, used a systematic approach, and we'll continue to use that. We're not going to rush into anything. And I believe extending phase two by canceling September 4th scrimmage versus Seneca Valley proves our commitment to that. We will take it slowly. We will move systematically and make sure we are keeping our kids safe.
Let me just jump in real quick. I mean, that so tightly aligns with CDC guidelines to start phase one, which again, conditioning, physical distancing for a period of time. We did that. And then enter into a phase two, which gets students closer together, more contact, gets a little bit tighter when you get into practice because now there's more contact. And then they recommend before you go outside with competition, you do internal competition. So that's the inter-squad green-white concept. And then finally, when you're seeing things are going well and there's the mitigation efforts are in place, you've got that peak at the top, which is competition outside, in this case of our school district, but still in the region. So the games are regional. We're not talking about traveling outside of the region.
Okay. So with that, our first game would be scheduled for September 11th. That would give us more time to develop the plan, make any adjustments necessary, and keep moving forward, which is our goal, to keep moving forward during this phase, similar to phase one. Next slide, Sean. Conditioning leading to temporary or extended closure. Based on the circumstances, if there's a requirement to move from the Pine Richland School District's hybrid model to a 100% virtual model, our recommendation is that all fall sports will be delayed. During this delay period, all sports would be encouraged to develop a virtual conditioning program. As an illustration to the level of commitment to the success of this plan, it is also recommended, and I'll draw your attention to bullet point number 2, that under the supervision of the Director of Athletics, that's me, and Mrs. Bowman, the principal, if a sport or activity plan is not being fully implemented, all activities for that program may be suspended. I have this circle here as a point of emphasis in my plan. I'll read it again. Under the supervision of the Director of Athletics or building principal, if the sport or activity specific plan is not being fully implemented, all activities for that program may be suspended. Again, that shows our commitment to it. We will hold each other accountable. We all take, in my meeting with our coaches yesterday, we all committed to taking ownership of this plan. And I expressed this point of emphasis on them. If they are not doing what they're supposed to do, we will shut it down. That would be my recommendation. Sean, next slide, please.
Let's
Just-
get the last bullet.
Yep. That last bullet there, Sean.
Sure.
Confirmed case.
Confirmed cases of COVID-19. High and moderate risk sports will likely lead to a quarantine period of 14 days, given the degree of physical contact associated with those sports. Again, with the physical sport of a physical lineman. Wanted to put that down there too. Next slide. Most of you have already seen this. These are the points of emphasis, the details in our plans. I'll take a few minutes here now to pause for those of you who may need to review it again. There are 3 slides that include the points of emphasis, so take some time now to just review it if needed.
Yeah, and I'll jump in just to move us along a little bit too is, again, number 3 is key because of the nature of the big 3 we've been talking about. We've got to do those things. If we're not feeling well, we've got to stay home. We've got to do all the mitigation efforts that are appropriate and, going through those system checks as listed there. Those are vital. Number 2, we already shared with you in terms of the additional mitigation for high risk in terms of getting the Allegheny Health Network trainers involved in in assessing students in high risk every single day practice and games, and then those for the game day only for the other levels. Okay, Sean, next one. Same thing here, again, points of emphasis, we're just, we lift out the impact and the importance of masks, so we talk about the need for students and coaches to be consistent with that. Again, during competition, that actual act of competition that's happening, masks can come off for that. That is part of the plan, but there's an expectation, once students come back to the sidelines or back to the bench, they physically distance, they catch their breath, they get a nice drink of water, and then when they get closer to the team, then the masks come back on. These points of emphasis have been consistent over a period of time, so a lot of things that the coaches have already implemented in phase one. Sean, anything else you wanted on that slide?
Good. Next one.
Well, I'd like to go back a slide, actually. So, yeah, that's good, right there. Keep it 1, 2, 3. Thanks, Sean. So, some people appreciate the analogy, some people don't. But I'll give it again because it's important to me. So, part of the success of school and part of the success of this plan is based on the honest, candid disclosure of symptoms. So we also know there's asymptomatic people. But when it comes to those who are symptomatic, we need the honest, candid disclosure of symptoms. When, over the decades, when our understanding of concussions began to change, it's tough to get athletes to self-disclose concussion symptoms. They don't want to be off the field. And it takes significant effort over many, many years to begin to make an impact on concussions. We now have baseline testing. We have all sorts of things happening as our awareness and understanding of concussion, the importance of concussion testing protocols, et cetera, is developed. Again, with this, it's the same idea. There will be some who are asymptomatic. That's the nature of COVID-19, and there's data that indicates that's more likely with children than it is with adults. But nonetheless, we still need honest self-reporting of students who are experiencing symptoms. And so that's an example, back to the slide, where it says if conditions, cases, or circumstances warrant, then action will be taken. And so if we have any indication from any of our teams that reporting is being discouraged, that would be reason to suspend that program, period. Now, with that said, the advantage of the hybrid as we have designed it is that it accounts for the big three, and so students who are asymptomatic, again, as they come into school, we've put the mitigation strategies in place in order to prevent or reduce significantly the potential spread of COVID-19. So for me, this is a hugely important point, and it's the crux of candor. The reason it's hard is because for moderate and high-risk sports, a confirmed test leads to a 14-day quarantine based on our discussion with Allegheny County Health Department. That's high stakes. But it is part of this recommendation. And so we need that to be very clear to the board that that is our thinking, because there are certain areas of this that have to be extremely clear so that if they're implemented, it's understood, what it is that we're talking about. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, we're on number 9.
Yep,
You
give
want
you a
to-
chance to review those, but I'd like to focus on slide number 12, which will be a change for most of our student athletes, at least in the high school level. Athletes will not be granted access to locker rooms. Teams will come dressed and prepared to compete. This is one of the non-negotiables that we've talked about before, and it represents a huge change for the culture of our student athletes. But again, if we want to continue moving forward, these are the changes we're going to have to make. Next slide,
Okay, Sean.
Sean. I'd like to draw your attention to point number 15. as outlined in the Allegheny County Health Department and WPIAL jointly released document, spectators are prohibited from all events. Competitions will not begin if spectators are present. Dr. P. alluded to this earlier. We are working towards providing a live streaming option for our parents. This, again, is another non-negotiable. We will have no spectators at our events, and we have a unique challenge at Pine Richland with the Hill. My guess is a lot of people would like to congregate and watch a game. That is non-negotiable. Nobody's allowed up there. Myself as the athletic director, I have the authority to shut that game down. If we don't comply by these standards, we don't play the game. If we all take ownership of this plan, if we want to see our student athletes continue to participate, some of us as adults have to do what we need to do to keep that moving. And that's, again, is another non-negotiable option. So I wanted to point that out as a point of emphasis. Slideshow. Physical distancing. As we mentioned on numerous occasions during phase 1, our goal is not just to get started. We would like to move forward with the activity. That goal will not change during phases 2 and 3. An integral part of our efforts toward accomplishing this goal is maintaining and following proper social distancing guidelines. In this slide, we've shared with you the social distancing guidelines for pre-practice, practice, and post-practice sessions. Again, it is imperative that we, the whole entire group that is invested in this, follow all these guidelines in an attempt to maintain participation in the extracurricular activities that we plan on engaging in.
And Sean, go ahead and change slides, but Sean, the next 4 slides, I think you can just hit on them briefly. They are repeats from phase 1 and 2 around pods in the weight room, and then the guidelines will follow if there's concerns of cases, if someone becomes sick at practice, and if we have an individual student that has an individual health concern, and how we'll work with that student and their family. So you can just kind of click and pause for a second. I think we can move through those rather quickly.
Sure.
Okay, Sean. Next slide. This is returning to, and this is the one about, an individual child that needs additional support. We would be working with a family physician and whatnot. Okay, Sean Simmons, go ahead.
Next slide.
Sean Simmons, go ahead, you can wrap it up.
Okay. This slide shows the link to this. There's a link to this form in the email that was sent to everyone. For student in phase 1, which was a voluntary phase, all our student athletes had to fill out an acknowledgement and waiver form. During phase 2 and phase 3, phase 2 is more considered our tryout for process, and phase 3 is competition. There may be some student athletes who will be now joining our program. They are also required to fill out this form as well. We will monitor those closely and make sure that every student athlete acknowledges and signs this waiver form as we move forward. And that is the presentation. Thanks. I just want to close by saying one thing. We've worked very hard to develop this plan, and we've been successful in phase 1. A lot of time and effort was spent into developing phase 2 and phase 3. We've put together the specific plans for each sport. We truly believe in that plan. We feel that we've put our student athletes in the best position to succeed. And we look forward to moving forward if we are allowed to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, just one last close for me too. I promise it's brief. It's just to be 100% clear, because so the recommendation from administration is to move forward with fall sports. There have been modifications and extensions to phase 2 to do that, and again with the plan approved by each sport or activity. So that is our recommendation. Thank you.